Forward to this panel. Frankly, Abhishek did such a phenomenal job that I'm a slight bit of nervous jitters. I hope to live up to the previous panel and the presentation before that. Some of you people right here, we've had the chance to interact before. DJ and I, we share a common history. And may I continue calling you DJ? Thank you. All right. So this is the thought leadership panel, which will largely focus around the kind of pieces that will be your growth levers for the year coming, and how do we want to leverage various tricks, tactics, channels, methodologies, algorithms, if you may, to get past the hurdle, which was 2020. How soon can we forget about it? All right. So there are a set of questions. We will spend about 10 minutes each on a question, and so that we have ample time left to go through various other questions that the remainder of the audience may have. I will quickly start with a round of introduction. I'll shortly introduce myself. Please feel free to take about 30 seconds to introduce yourself and what you do. And if possible, what's your goal for 2021? Just a single liner. So hi, my name is Malay Harsh. I'm VP Marketing, CleverTap. My one key goal is global expansion, so we can get more and more brands that we can help acquire, engage with their users better and improve customer lifetime value by driving retention as the growth lever. Over to you.
Hi all, I'm Ashish Bajaj. I'm head of marketing for MediBuddy. It's a digital healthcare platform. And one goal for me is to provide quality healthcare services to billion Indians.
Hi guys, my name is Akmal Zamrud and I take care of organic marketing at Razorpay. One goal for us this year is basically to enable small medium businesses to actually go online and start acquiring customers through digital channels.
Hi everyone, my name is Rajesh Sethuraman. I head marketing for EasyBuy. We're part of Landmark Group, value format fashion stores. And one key goal for us, our aspiration, vision to make aspirations affordable for customers. We want to expand more. So we are about 100 stores already in 4 years. We are looking at reaching about 150 stores. Yeah.
Santosh here. I head business for FTH Daily, which is an initiative of Fresh to Go. So Fresh to Go, it is in vegetables and Fresh to Go is in meat and fish and stuff like that. FTH Daily handles all milk, so it's a subscription platform for milk, etc. So this is a recent, relatively a recent entrant. So primarily our thing is growth right now, and in 3 years, then we will probably look at the merger with Fresh to Home or whatever. But the purpose, as somebody had mentioned here, I guess would be to enable the nutrition part of your food, right? And deliver nutrition to our customers at its maximum potential also.
Request everybody to use the mic because the recording will come through.
Okay.
Hi, this is Kirtiman. I drive performance marketing for the GST business at ClearTax, and my goal for this year is to grow adoption and simplify taxation for and compliance for small and medium enterprises in India.
Hi, this is Dhananjay. I head customer acquisition and product growth for Homeland. So I look into marketing, product, and inside sales. So one of the biggest objective which we have is getting into 35 cities. So we should be the first home interior player to get into 35 cities. We are already cash flow positive. So by this year, we want to become EBITDA positive so that we can go public.
Morning everyone, my name is Vipul. I head marketing for Trends Emerging Markets. This is the new baby on the block from the Reliance family, which is about expanding into category B, C, and D class towns. So for us, expansion is the key going to be this year. And Reliance is known for audacious dreams and targets. So we have really, really high targets. In about 2 years' time, we already have 400 city presence. Revenues are growing. And we've seen a good amount of traction coming in from the smaller towns. Fashion has been really accepted well. So riding the same wave, we hope to reach out to more consumers in various pockets of the country.
Just a second. So the first Abhishek that came and presented mentioned only shirts are selling and no more pants. Can you please concur that?
Okay. So, while the session is on, I'm going to share a lot of insights of how shopping happens in these semi-urban or semi-rural towns, whatever you want to call it. Yes, we saw the athleisure, the casual category seeing a spurt in growth. Sleepwear, we saw a good amount of traction coming in. But yes, formals were down. And especially in these towns, formal is not the formal what we talk about, which is jacket and ties and all. It's wearing a formal shirt and a trouser is a formal apparel for them. But yes, denim is also part of formals there in these set of towns. So we saw a spurge in the category.
Hi, Siddharth. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for AirAsia India. So I look after marketing, PR, corporate communications, ancillary revenue, catering operations, and sustainability for the airline. And our goal this year is leveraging digital to enhance the customer experience. And of course, the long-term goal remains to enable everyone to fly, which is the global goal that we have as an airline.
Awesome. So on to the beginning of our panel. I think the questions have all been shared with you a day prior. More in the context of, like we were discussing in the previous panel, where a digital currency, you feel a panic button hitting immediately if I don't see the currency in my wallet. Or, and I get really miffed if Lenskart misses the date for sending out my glasses. I'm a very major loyalist of Lenskart. Shit, Ramnik isn't around. Should have heard that one. All right. So, in continuity with that, how are you seeing customer experience evolving for the industry and your business that is unique to our time today? Feel free to start with you there.
So I come from the industry which is into healthcare, and being in healthcare, I think sadly, it was not the industry that was built for the demand, or to say for the consumers. It was built more from a supply point of view. So we had not before or till the pandemic, there was nothing done in terms of building it for the consumer or making the consumer's life easy. Though everyone talked about getting that I have 3,000 hospitals, I have 50,000 doctors, but were they working towards solving the real problem of a customer? Say, if I can't walk to a hospital, was a hospital coming to me? That's more about creating or keeping the customer at the center. And that is what I think is what our business was trying to do. That bring you to bring customer at the center and bring the entire services at your home. And that is where it started from, building for the customer experience. And it's like how KPMG was showing a lot of data in terms of how are the levers of businesses getting built. Convenience was one of it. And 47% of the people who've been going to hospital regularly year after year says that there is nothing that has been built for us. My mom, who cannot walk, still has to take a wheelchair to reach to a hospital. So yes, it is way important for us to build businesses and to scale them, keeping customer at the center. And that is what also we are trying to do.
Awesome. Siddharth, because you come from a unique proposition where experience is everything, how have you seen that changing, and more in the digital parlance? How are you differentiating yourself and seeing that for your business?
So there's an immediate change that has happened because of the pandemic, I think, which has accelerated digital. We've been fortunate in that sense because it's always been a focus for us, and so we've been insulated from international travel as AirAsia India as an organization, obviously not as a group. And we have also been insulated from older, more corporate business audiences. So what we saw immediately happening in the aftermath of the pandemic is the demographics changed, and therefore the customer experience changed. So the behavior and the trends and the purpose change. To cite a point, for example, in the immediate aftermath of the lockdown, June, July, August, 50% of consumers or guests who were flying in the country were under 29. Our older audience is completely dipped across the industry, across all airlines. People above 40 were hardly traveling, above 60 was less than 5%. And that meant that the adoption potential of consumers, their openness to looking at digital solutions was a lot higher. So to take a simple example, we were able to increase our web check-in percentage from 30% to over 90%, which means obviously that the kind of data that you're getting in advance of the customers coming in is significantly higher. Thanks also to government regulation, which mandated that now people needed to self-declare their health, they need to self-declare which address they're going to and all of that, which means we now have PIN codes suddenly in a database of all consumers of both where you're coming from and where you're going to. So all of that accelerated a lot. We were therefore able to look at the entire ecosystem of travel and have relevant partnerships with other individuals, because we realized that the importance now has moved from price, which again, because of government regulation, became the same, became the standard across all airlines. And suddenly the choice of brand and the experience that you were giving became even more paramount. I mean, as a long-term trend, unfortunately, what has happened, if you look at aviation from its heyday to now, the price of an airline ticket has dropped. If you look at the average price per seat kilometer, has dropped decade on decade. In the opposite, for example, if you look at industry like coffee, where coffee was a commodity and has moved into an experience with the likes of Starbucks, the price has moved up. And airlines, unfortunately, have moved, in my opinion, from being an experience to really being a commodity. And that trend needs to reverse if you actually need to make money or margins from that. So it's the differentiated experiences that you can offer, whether that's in terms of the meal service that you're giving, the cabin crew service, the kind of ancillary offerings, the nature of the seats and the comfort of the seats, as well as the hygiene factors. We played a great emphasis on becoming the #1 on-time performance airline in the country, or having the lowest cancellation rate, or adopting the most flexible policies, because we recognize that the concern that individuals have is on things like cancellations. If I cancel, will I get my money back? I don't know if I'll be able to travel or not, because state regulations are changing. And we were able to do that and see a shift also to more direct channels from the aggregators, because people tend to have more faith on the direct channels, and we were able to offer things like a same-day credit, for example, for cancellations on direct channels, which, with the concern on cash flows in the travel industry in general, not everybody is able to do. So I think a lot of that changed, and a lot of that change is here to stay now.
There's going to be that shift, the paradigm shift, which will just stick around. Awesome. Dhananjay, before the pandemic really hit us, you were an experience platform. After the pandemic has hit us, of course, there are hygiene-related issues, but you are still an experience platform. How have you seen, do you think you have seen a major shift in the paradigm in the way you are offering experience, and more so digitally, because there's ample competition in the city and then expanding?
Yeah, so one of the things which really happened good for us was before pandemic, okay, we have an average order value of 6.5 lakhs, right? It's like an automobile, you want to go and test it out in the showrooms, right? Home interior is similar, you want to go meet interior designer with your floor plan, see how everything is going to be made. So this was one of the challenges during the COVID time, that you cannot open showrooms during April, March period. Now what we did was we started something known as online meetings. At that point of time, we productized everything, wherein we started online meetings on the basis of your floor plan. Interior designer will tell you how exactly your interiors will be made. Now at that point of time, what happens was that our overall meetings, okay, so we used to have showroom meetings, our online meeting increased considerably, which actually made us become the biggest player in terms of home interiors. Because now we were able to cater so many meetings, and because this was at your convenience. So earlier we used to see people walking over on Saturdays and Sundays. Now because it's online, now people can come during the weekdays also. And our average order value actually grew by 15%, and cake dropped by 20% during this time, because of this thing. And I think while we have been talking about COVID having an adverse effect in terms of home interiors, I think it had more positive, because earlier what used to happen is people used to always compare you to carpenter, plumber, painter, right? Now, because it's COVID, I would rather prefer a home interiors player to get everything done end to end. So for us, it was actually a blessing in disguise, where we grew almost 2-3x during this period. Also, overall, we were able to cater more customers. So for us, it was
pretty cool. I think Santosh and Kirti, I would want to hear your take on the B2C business as to how you've seen that evolve. So for Santosh, you have a subscription model. Kirti, you are looking to interface with B2C customers, and you can decide which one goes first. But you are seeing that interplay, and how is that experience evolving? I think I would like to start with you, Santosh.
Sure. This is a subscription e-grocery player, as I said earlier. So in terms of customer expectations, so there are generic expectations from a grocery player that the customer is looking for, and then there are different divergent segments of customers, and then each person has their own, each segment has their own unique expectations from such a service. So at FTH Daily, what we have seen is, so one is the quality, price, range, on-time delivery, great customer service. So these are all kinds of constants across. There are but some customers are actually looking for convenience and not so much of value. There are some customers who are actually, so if you drop the price of potato by 1 rupee, you can actually see some 2,000 orders more, right? But then that is one segment. So what we have seen is the customer segments also is very fickle, right? So your thought process is very dynamic and not something that is static across a spectrum of time or period or even a kind of a session, right? So, for example, today, if I am saying, 20% off, 2 rupees down, or whatever, there could be, sometimes it's a perception as well, isn't it? Sometimes if you just say off, and even if you do not have a change in price, but people still buy, right? So it is more, it is not that absolute 2 rupees saving that the person is looking for. It is the perception of being a smart shopper, right? It is the self-congratulatory moment of that I am buying smartly and saving money for my family or doing the right thing for my family or things like that, right? So it's much deeper. It's more psychological than the list of items that we normally associate shopping with, right? So that has been a kind of a revelation that we are actually working on, how we can deliver more value. Like, the purpose, like, somebody has mentioned. I think it is extremely important because given this, the offer mode of communication that you see from typical e-retail companies, I think if you set the purpose, for example, Atmanirbhar, how we help our farmers, right? I know a lot of people have been saying this, and I think it is kind of a generic proposition now. But in fact, rather than saying it and then probably showing the proof points, I think that credibility also matters, isn't it? Rather than saying, yeah, we help 2,000 farmers, like somebody said, we have 50,000 hospitals and 50,000 doctors. But then ultimately that I do not really care for that, right? So would you be able to tell me something that will add value or make me change my behavior by giving the proof points that I want?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so in terms of customer experience, right after lockdown, 2 things happened. One thing is for B2C segment, there was a huge surge in terms of demat accounts, and new millennials started investing and they were looking for smart instruments for investments. The other segment is the SME segment, which saw huge financial distress because of the pandemic. There was complete chaos and panic around in the SME sector. So to address both these segments, what was important was to, for the millennials, it was important to engage with them and give them the right information so that they make informed decisions for investments. Similarly, for the SME segment, there was a huge misinformation. Deadlines are going to get pushed, not going to get pushed. New compliance measures are going to kick in or they're not going to kick in. So as a platform to address both these segments, what was important for us to move the marketing from a more conversion-oriented approach to a more engagement-oriented approach, where we educate the users, we understand their problems and solve these problems through content, videos, blogs, and much other platforms that were available. So to address these, we created a learning model, learning programs that could address these segments and give them right information through our webinars, through e-learning modules. And this helped us achieve 3 things. One is that the longer the user engaged with our content, we found that the more active they were on the platform. So habit formation was one thing that was achieved. Later on, the second thing which happened was the acquisition cost went down, because the longer they the longer, the more active they were, because of we had to reduce our investment costs on paid marketing considerably, and we through our organic channels we could convert these users. And the third thing was we could build a huge community of followers who had engaged with our content, and that created a kind of a booster for our referral program and recommendations. And those customers who were happy with our content, they eventually brought in more users on the platform. So overall, with the pandemic, our engagement-oriented approach helped build a better customer experience for us.
Thank you. I think with that, I'll move to the next question. This is something that while chatting with a lot of people within the marketing fraternity, so I also had about 10 years of B2C marketing experience before I moved into CleverTap. And what we always experienced was, there was always analytics, and it's an overexploited term, we all know that. You can loosely throw it around at univariate analysis on Excel to Google Analytics to multivariate, which most people can't even process. But what eventually would happen is, so there's a team that does analytics, then there's a team that does some channel. It is now popularly called omni-channel. And then from there on to, there's somebody who's looking at revenue, and then sales and outcomes. The problem that I wanted to check with this forum today is, now that the times have evolved and it's no longer a 4-year-old system where these data silos were as big a problem. How are you seeing analytics evolving for your business today and cutting across data silos to deliver value? Or is it still, feel free to speak out if it is still a challenge that you're still grappling with. How do you see that evolving? Would you like to take a stab at this?
Thanks. See, the market which I handle is not a very digital savvy, engaged, consumer. But having said that, the digital penetration is increasing, especially the social media. SMS do works. Now, what happened? We saw there is a phenomena after COVID. We saw the sales going up. We didn't know the reason. Then we realized that it's a revenge shopping phenomenon which is happening. People were curtailed in their houses, and as soon as the lockdown got lifted, people thought they got their freedom, and the first thing this wanted to do is shop and shop everything. So we saw that going up, the business going up, and then we analyzed the data which we had, the categories which were going, as I said, the athleisure and other categories were going up. Now, the average ticket size of the consumers went up. We also provide different slabs to increase the shopping value. We also tapped into the cross formats which we have across towns and cities. So there we leverage the data of consumers. Somebody who shopped at digital, we wanted to tell them buy apparel now, give them some hooks to come back to the store. It worked very well for digital and the fresh category, which is the food grocery category, because they are impulse, right? So we saw that. So we leveraged our cross customer data, but I still feel there is a lot which can be done on customer segmentation. While we have our customer segmentation in place, we can do a lot, further dissect, do cross promos online, give them vouchers to come back, which has worked in the past, but then it needs to be even more intensive, something which the consumers need to come back to us and shop. So yeah, answering that, yes, we have leveraged data, but yes, we have some distance to cover.
Rajesh, if I may ask you the same question, would you like me to repeat the question? Okay. So I think I would like to add another caveat. There were people we were talking about Lenskart integrating. Oh, Lenskart is back. You missed the last joke. All right. So so there are profile merges that a lot of people do. There's an offline and online integration, so you really know more. Do you see that cutting across your data silos? Are you guys into it?
Okay.
So EasyBuy, the business I come from, we were a 100% offline business, absolutely zero digital presence. So in the last 1 year, we have taken the first step. So during the pandemic, we went online. We went into a marketplace for the first time, and we are still, understanding how that works and stuff like that. And to that point, so it's not that complex as of now because we're not really into multi-channel, not really taken off with the Omni, but taken the first step. Answering back to the first question, what you had about data. So data, yeah, we do extensively use data in a few areas of the business. One, primarily on the planning front, because we want the right product to be there in the right store when the customers want it there. So there are about 65 cities now. So every city behaves differently, and so we use extensively data to understand what works better and replenish also at a style color code level, because not many brands do that. So that's something we are able to do with dynamic replenishment using data. And second, from a CRM loyalty point of view, we use again data extensively to discover when the customer is in the flow, if we are able to understand the past behavior and talk to them real time of what he's looking for or she's looking for in the store, and using the past behavior can we influence the shopping which is happening currently. So that's something which is used very well, and that increases one, affinity, second, the experience in the store real time, and third, in terms of revenue attribution also it works. So these are two areas primarily I would say data really helps us drive. But yeah, now that we have taken off with our omni-channel journey, it's going to be critical how we look at data differently.
Akmal, because we were talking about, right before the panel started, we were talking about how B2C, or rather the MSME is the larger motion that you're looking to drive. How are you leveraging analytics and cutting across those data silos to move that behavior from point A to point B?
Sure. So within the payment space itself, right, we enable small medium enterprises, and right before COVID hit, right, so we started open the doors to more freelancers, homepreneurs, entrepreneurs, and stuff like that. So you don't need to be a registered business to actually do a transaction or get transactions there. So what happens during analytics is you know the number of transactions that are coming from multiple industries as well, right? So the payment space is such a big space where you can understand where the growth is coming from. For example, within COVID, right, when COVID hit, you understand that rent being paid online is more. So you understand that and like focus towards marketing towards those channels. So people who collect rent are collecting rent online instead of like hard cash as such. So there are multiple different silos that we actually marketed towards based on these analytics. So we first take a category wise split of like which industries are working better, which industries have seen a growth spurt. For example, online grocery delivery did see a growth spurt, but like furniture delivery did not. So we understand that like when you start that, so these local grocers, so if we directly market towards them, I think that works in our advantage because the conversion rates become much more higher once we target towards those cohorts. So in terms of that, and also keeping in mind that the freelancer market is also a huge market which increased. So that is something that we actually saw and marketed towards and saw a significant amount of growth. So also Razorpay has been pro-digital right from the start. So I think that kind of worked in our favor as well in terms of that. And I think marketing totally from Razorpay is a data-driven engine. And we rely heavily on analytics and like dig deep into all the marketing aspects of it.
Awesome. I think I'll move on to my next question, and this has got more to do about data segmentation. And if you want, you could probably take us through if you are doing cohort-based analysis and how those journeys are working through. So the question is, how is user and data segmentation enabling real-world personalization of engagement for your business? And more importantly, what are the do's and don'ts marketers should be careful about? For example, how personal is too personal?
Exactly right. So what we did was we understood that freelancer is a huge market. So we understand that a normal payment gateway page that is displayed through either a performance channel or an organic channel or through a YouTube ad does not have a high conversion rate because people don't understand that. So what we need to do is make it simpler, dumb it down for consumers to understand what happens. So go live for a freelancer payment page is 3 days. So that is the insight that we got, that number of freelancers getting payments online are kind of increasing. So we saw a 3x growth within a matter of just 2 weeks after COVID hit, after the lockdown hit actually. So what happened over there was we prepared ourselves very well to actually create collaterals so that people can come and convert easily on our platform and enable those users to actually complete their journey through the user payment interface. So that is something that we actually try to do. And in terms of how personal is too personal, I think personalization till what you do or who you are, I think that is okay. There are some breach of privacy issues, of course, when you work in the payment space. I don't think we even tend to look at that space, but I think name personalization or personalization of who you are or where you are, I think that is perfectly all right. But for example, we have heard a lot of controversy about a lot of different companies picking up data from voice search and stuff like that. I don't think that is the right way to go forward.
Thank you. Siddharth, you also talked about the depth of data that is now available because of various mandates that have come in from government and plus the heavy drive on digitalization. How are you seeing this data segmentation playing to the strength of your business?
So there's a phenomenal depth of data which is lying with us and underutilized to a large extent. I mean, if you look at even simple things like mobile numbers and email addresses, most industries or organizations strive to get those for all customers. We have mobile numbers and email addresses for all of our customers, even if they book through the aggregator channel now, because it's now a government mandate to pass it on. It always has been, because we need to be able to notify them of gate changes, cancellations, etc. But the enforcement is a lot stricter now. With us, what we have done is we've said that if the philosophy of the organization is to democratize travel, and we want to personalize experiences, then democratizing data within the organization is one of the first barriers that we need to break. So barring personal data, personal information, name, email address, phone number, which is only accessible to individuals who need to service the customer, the aggregation of insights is available to everyone within the organization. And that enables them or empowers them to actually take action quickly. So to take an example of web check-in data, right? Web check-in data is relevant not just to the marketing team, but to the ground operations team, also to the IT team, also to cabin crew services, etc., for a number of different things. Because of that, and because we're sharing that data at a global level, we were able to pick up insights, for example, from China air operations a lot before any other airline in India. We saw the impact that the pandemic was having in China, and therefore we were one of the first to launch a sale in India to secure forward bookings and build up those cash flows before the pandemic really hit. And if you look at how, the way in which we're now looking at data is there are obviously gaps of which are there in each of these systems. I mean, if you look at customer lifetime value models, they've gone for a toss in the course of this pandemic. What the retention rates were and the frequency of travel and the people who are traveling has not been the same in the last year at all. So there's a complete overhaul that is needed of a lot of those things. And there are gaps in the data in simple things like it's more about the way in which the data is there is everybody has the data. How do you integrate that data with other data sets that you're sitting on and draw insight from it? To take one example, we were blind to cash transactions that were happening for purchase of food on board, right? So if you've bought a meal on board, and then separately I have sent you an NPS survey and asked you, how was your meal on board? And you've replied saying the temperature was not good enough. I have no idea what meal you consumed, short of calling you up and then, which is kind of obtrusive, is to say, what did you actually consume? What was wrong with the temperature? I know, technically should know because you bought the meal on my flight, what meal you bought. So what we're now doing is empowering the crew with devices to be able to capture some of that data at a PNR level. To say that if there is a generic thing over there for a month, I see that people did not like the temperature of the basa fish that was being served. Then I need to look into the temperature of that, rather than getting back to each customer and saying what was the issue that you had. Same for loyalty. There are massive gaps in, so we've done an entire overhaul of systems in this period, linking up Salesforce data with social media data, linking up loyalty data with internal data, and marrying and mapping those systems. Because I think that's where the core of all of it will be, is how do you leverage data across different data sets to draw insight and then empower the teams to be able to actually take action from that data.
Thanks. Dhananjay, I'll give you a hypothetical case scenario. Assuming I applied for a home interior service I got a quotation, and I may have said yes. And 1 week down the path, I get a notification or a web push, or maybe a PN, that tells me 40% off on our base prices. Do you see that being a relic of the past, or do you see that still happening? And how are you safeguarding my experiences against it?
Yeah, so currently I think it depends on your cohort. Okay, so now we are so in Homeland especially, now there is no marketing, it's growth. So basically we look right from marketing to inside sales funnel to basically order funnel, right? So when a customer comes in, what source is he coming in, which city has it come in from, and what is the inside sales, how many calling has been done, what is call to connect, how many calls to connect, calls to fix, then fix to successful meeting. So I know each part of your cycle, right? From inside sales, and finally how you were treated by the field sales team overall. Now when I know each part of yours, if I know that you have met me, okay, and inside sales have given you a call and you have met me for, say for example, wardrobe or modular kitchen. I know you have had a meeting, but because you found it expensive, you actually did not convert. Okay, I get those triggers. Now what I am going to do is, through my journeys, I will send you a WhatsApp, I will send you an email, I will send you a web post saying that 20% off. This is the offer to convert you. Okay, so this is how we have started seeing all the cohort, be it if you go into, we actually have started going to substatus level. Say if you are not actively pursued, if you currently are not actively pursued customers, or if you are dead lead, or if you were just browsing through, right, which did not convert, what we are going to do is we are going to set a specific customer journey on the basis of the request which you have sent. So once you landed, you were like home interiors and you wanted to go into home interiors. So in email, WhatsApp and in-app notification, you are going to receive almost the same communication saying that this is available for you, this is 20% off, please reach out to our interior designer. So this is how we have been able to segmentize and create a silos across all those specific cohorts.
Awesome. That's fairly interesting, because there are instances when you go on an e-com platform and you purchase a pair of glasses, and then 2 days later you get a notification, buy one, get one. And that kind of pinches, because you talked about it. I feel like a champion if I am able to get a great deal for myself. And that happiness just vanishes away, poof, when you realize, oops, had I just waited 2 more days. So great piece there. Thanks, Dhananjay. So basis what we've just talked about in FTH, because this is again subscription based, or if you want to talk about ManyBuddy, how are you seeing this cutting across for your businesses? Are data silos no longer an issue? Are you able to cross communicate as much and leverage everything, or do you still see the industry grappling with some challenges that you would like to highlight?
Hello. Yeah. So at Fresh to Home as well as FTH Daily, we approach data very seriously. So there are various cohorts that we have. So one is the month of joining cohort. Then we have AOV cohorts. Then we have recency, frequency. So what we have generally seen is, in FTH Daily, let me talk about FTH Daily. So there is a convenience cohort as well as there is a value seeker cohort, right? So it's very simple and plain. So any marketing, communication activity, efforts and spends at the value cohort will be more or less around the saving equation or the generic kind of stuff, range and various. Convenience cohort, for example, I may not be able to sell blueberries to the value conscious cohort, but I can do a package, an assortment of exotic fruits and vegetables to the convenience cohort, right? Because they are a little more evolved and their AOV actually would be around 120, because this is an everyday purchase thing, right? So milk 1 liter, which is 2 packets, would be around 60. Sometimes it could be 80 depending on A2 milk and organic milk, etc. But generally we have seen this thing as 150. But most of them, which is like around 40% of them, they have their AOVs at 55. And the idea is to lift them up from 55 to around 80 to 90. So that is an effort at a very basic level that we continue to do, and it has for the last 6 months. We have actually seen our AOV moving up from 59 to now around 82, 82 per order, which is like an everyday order.
Awesome.
So if I have to answer this, I'll answer it in a very couple of levels. So let me start with personalization. Now, when I talk about, let's take our own family. Not one drink is what your entire family will be having. Now scale it to millions of users outside and then add healthcare to it. It has to be personalized. And because I'm trying to understand, there is a problem with Ashish in terms of an ailment, and what is the solution of that ailment for Ashish has to be very personal to him. Okay, so I can't give him a Saradon basis saying that, okay, that is a general trend. I've been giving Saradon to everyone and I've given it to him. So yes, one, personalization core to the user is a requirement of the category and the business that we are in. Now, when we say the data sit in different buckets, sadly, yes, it is still the truth for us, because I'm talking about doing a health check for a corporate employee or a retail user. For me, as small as a town which is just 2 kilometers in radius, and they've never made a Paytm transaction because the entire journey was through a call for us. Those data points still don't come to us. But the beauty is there are places where we are data rich in terms of predicting that, say, for instance, X city will see the similar ailment in next, or has a periodic trend of that ailment in that particular month or the days of the years, is when we start personalizing communication around those specific ailments and start telling people that now is the time to start having conversations on health check for this particular ailment, or start talking to the doctors. So like how you were saying that we got to understand from China beforehand and we could easily do a sale and have a cash deposit. So that goes for us as well. We know for sure March end, this is the ailment that's going to come in Jaipur. And that is how we start making it personalized for that particular city. So yes, at many levels, personalization is the core for healthcare in digital, because we have to make sure that we are imparting the right kind of one diagnosis to the solution.
Awesome. I think moving on to the next question, and this is going to be largely open to everybody, I would want to hear what all of you think about this specifically, because it is also very important for me to understand what my customers and prospects are thinking out there in the market. And you are right at the cusp of it. So to give you a little more context, I was in the middle of a APAC conversation with a lot of leaders from Singapore, Jakarta, Philippines, Australia, ANZ. One thing that clearly came out, that everybody is looking to multiply their customer lifetime value, or at least grow it. And then they are back calculating basis various levels, and then whatever strategies come along the way. It eventually all does boil down to the retention, but what I have conclusively not been able to identify anybody spelling it out as to this rate or this percentage or this point is good enough for me. We all want it 100%, of course. Why anything less? But is there a way you would want to define retention for your business, and how does that truly impact customer lifetime value for it to be a sustainable business, like people pointed out in this panel and the previous one? So the question again is, how are you seeing, what is an ideal retention rate for you, and how are you seeing it for your business from your lens? We'll start with Siddharth and then we'll move to you, Mr. Mishra.
So, I tend to agree with you. I don't think there's an ideal retention rate at a business level. I think there's an ideal retention rate at an individual level, and you can aggregate that into cohorts, or you can aggregate that into certain sets of consumers. And as I said, the whole CLTV model has gone for a toss in the last year. The way in which people were consuming, for example, I don't see corporate travel coming back in the same way as it was at least till 2024. I don't see organizations, I don't see individuals traveling. I see organizations cutting down, one, because they have got used to technology and to being able to conduct meetings on Zoom calls and things like that. And I also see the economic pressures on organizations entailing that they will cut down on two aspects which are a pain to marketers: advertising costs, and the second is travel. And with that happening, obviously, if I look at corporate segment or cohort, which is the most frequent travel cohort, their retention rates are going to be significantly different. And what those are still to be borne out. However, I do see that what becomes relevant is to look at what is your share of wallet that you're being able to take. And one thing was the last panel also spoke about, and this came in, I think, when we were discussing CoinSwitch as well, right? Is what is the referral? What is more important to me than how often you are going to travel is how many more people can you convince to travel with me, because the larger pie of audience is a lot bigger, and I'm sure that's true for Medibuddy and things like that as well. There is a limit to how much I can grow my consumption of say pharmaceuticals or things like that, but that doesn't mean I can't bring more people into the fold. And that, I think, is how we need to define the customer lifetime value, as not being the value of the transactions that you will do with me over your lifetime, and I discount that at a time value. But what is your lifetime value from the value that you bring to me, not just as an individual, but also from your referrals. And also not a revenue value, but a profit value. You might have a CLTV value to me at a revenue level, but if you're only a value shopper, only a discount shopper, and only buy on sale, then it's not as relevant as a CLTV model. So I think we need to look at all these three things and come to a new model of CLTV or retention rates. I don't have an answer, honestly, to that. I don't think there is a correct answer at an aggregate level to retention.
Thanks. Idle rate would be 100%. I don't want any customer to go anywhere else except come back to me. But obviously that's not possible. The industry which we operate in, people have choices to go and shop around. I mean, I really can't restrict anyone just to come to me. And hence the in-store experience matters a lot. How I treat everyone who comes in. Give them a tour around of the store, what they have. Also understand why have they come. Are they casual shoppers, or they are just walking because their friend has come here to shop. So in-store experience matters a lot. So one, we are focusing on retaining our customers through our experience, in-store experience, and also giving them the offers which they need to look up to. Like every 2 months, we change our gifts which we give on our stores for increasing their ATS, which is average ticket size. So I upscale them. I make them go higher up the value chain and then tell them to buy more. Every 2 months, we need to change. We have been changing gifts, and we have seen a surge about 34% in increase in the shopping value just by tweaking this. No other retailer in these smaller towns offers any gift because it can dent, but we being a large format, large group, we can afford to. But having said that, the cost of the gift is getting compensated with the shopping value increase which the customer is giving back to me. So one is the retention, which I'm doing with experience and gifting and other brand personalization, which I do. Recommendation is also what helps us, get back our customers. Somebody who has shopped would recommend my store to friends and family. They also come into my fold, and I ensure that I don't lose them. Third thing is we are trying to develop local spokesperson or the influencers, college students, people who are politically sort of connected, people whom the normal public can look up to. So we are also trying to bring them into our fold through our loyalty program, which is customized differently for them. So which we will be trying this year, which was supposed to be done last year. We couldn't do it. We are going to do it this year.
Yeah, so in our case, we have clear set of retention goals. So if you are coming to Homeland, if you have done home interiors, then 2 other categories will open up, which is Homeland store, where you can buy wallpapers, you can buy paintings, all those kind of things. And there is work home furniture, which will open up to you. right? This is only for retained users. Now what happens is we have quarterly cake goals, right? I know how much of cake I am going to get from home interiors as a category. Now if I need to achieve this cake goal, what is set to me, I need to have XYZ target for the other categories also, which is homeland store and which is basically your work home office furniture, right? So we have set clear cut sales goals, clear cut revenue goals for these two categories, which we need to come to retention, which will enable me to achieve those cake targets, which have been to an extent given even to investor that this is going to be my overall target in this category, and overall this is the cake goals which we are doing. So every quarterly what we do is we give our sales team a target that these many retained users will be doing this much of business on homeland store, this much of business on basically your work home office furniture. So that is how we go about it and set everything in numbers and then push for those goals.
Got it. Kirti?
Yeah, so in terms of retention, we have certain thumb rules in mind because taxation as a category is more about habit formation. If a person continues to file taxes for a certain period of time, he ends up continuing on the platform because of his client's data is on the platform, his invoices are on the platform. So what we try to do is in terms of volume and frequency, we try to ensure that the user uses at least for a certain period of time. The initial months filing on the platform or educating the users on the platform in the onboarding period is very, very important. And that's where we have created a comprehensive marketing program to educate the users of how to use the platform in the first set of few months in which users usually drop off. And we have identified certain drop-off points on the platform in terms of multiple use cases for each particular industry, each particular turnover bracket, where the users tend to drop off, what are the pain points of those users in terms of usage. And we try to solve them through our marketing channels, through WhatsApp, through emails, through SMS, to educate those users on how to cross that particular threshold and move to the next level. And once the users continue using the platform for about a certain period of time, we've seen that the users stay on for at least a year and a half. And that's where our retention goals meet, where the users convert to a power user cohort and active users on the platform.
Got it. Over to you, Santosh.
At Fresh to Home, FTH Daily hasn't used any of those things because it's relatively new. But at Fresh to Home, we have been using this tool called NARCAR report. Which we have been closely monitoring kind of every 2 weekly, fortnightly basis. So NAR is new user retention rate, CAR is current user retention rate, and RAR is React users retention rate. So we do it on a WAPU, weekly average paying user, or DAPU kind of a basis, or daily average paying user kind of a basis. So to answer your question, what would be the ideal thing? So what we have been experiencing is between around 70 to 80% of CAR, which is current user. So React can be, the retention rate is, if you are doing it on a weekly basis, this would be like, the week preceding, 7 days preceding today. And if I am talking about current user, a user who has come to us, bought in with us the previous week. And React would be the user who has not bought with us for the last 3 weeks. And the new user would be any user who has come newly, joined us the previous week. So that is how so every industry will have different. For example, home lane, after the first one, there might not be a repeat purchase at all of that particular product category. But in our case, because it is a weekly or a bi-weekly or kind of a monthly, so our average frequency in a month is 2.2 now, which is something that we are planning to raise up to around 4, because people buy meat and fish at least like 4 times weekends in a month, right? So that rate we have been. So React users are actually, if you think about it, it's actually more. So around 40%. The current user retention rate on an average would be around between 70 to 85%, and new user is typically around 30%. That is because new users are still experimenting with the platform. Say they buy once, and then they'll probably go back to their offline shops or something else to purchase the next time, and then they come back, after a period of time.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, Rajesh.
Yeah. So at Landmark, we have a loyalty program called Landmark Rewards, which is one of the largest program in the country. At EasyBuy, we have recently joined and merged with the program. But we look at retention. I mean, in our business, we use terms like repeaters and lapses. So repeaters, we break it down into few levels. One is the first-time repeaters after shopping for the first time. How frequently they repeat. I mean, when is the next repeat expected possibly, depending on what they shop and value, etc. And second is we also have a cutoff, top 30% of our customers who contribute to majority revenue. We specifically measure repeat for them separately. And then the overall repeat percentages. So this is the three key metrics we track. And then there are other cuts, like like the data cohorts we were discussing in the past. So we have cohorts like weekend buyers, deal seekers, family buyers, people who athleisure, sports and related categories. So different cuts. So we look at that as a separate level. But if you look at top three, that's a key metrics. And if I have to give a industry level average, I mean I'll not be able to share the Landmark Group rewards percentages, but to give you an idea of apparel as an industry, typical repeat before the pandemic. Typically used to be around 45 to 50% because there's a lot of churn which happens in offline retail. Post the pandemic, we see a big jump. I mean, because of whatever efforts we have put and the way consumers have stuck to us in terms of our top 30% as well as the high customer lifetime value customers, it's moved up to around 65% also at the industry level. So that's to give you a kind of a benchmark. It depends on a lot of actions which has happened also in the last 1 year. Things have changed, so it's not really, we don't know whether this is what the future holds, but quite positive that things will only improve from here.
Thanks. Akmal.
Yeah, so over the last 1 year, I think retention rates have drastically changed, and we have seen some huge surges in terms of retention rates. Mostly when we dug deep into why this was happening, right? So education as a category, usually the retention rate was on a quarterly basis because people used to pay fees on a quarterly basis. Now, what happened with the emergence of e-learning as well as like online classes as well as tutors going online was the average retention rates became on a monthly basis. So that's one of the key factors why retention rates improved for us in terms of a payment perspective. Now, if you go channel wise, right, people who find Razorpay or like any payment gateway or payment processing company organically have better retention rates than the ones who are acquired through other performance channels or social channels. So that is something because the person already knows the brand. The person comes through a brand search, comes to the payment processing segment of things, and then uses the product. Now, just to add to how to improve the retention rates, right? So one thing that we have seen is that products per customer is one metric that we actively use. So if we solve more than one problem for a customer, the retention rate automatically goes up, irrespective of the channel, the category and stuff like that. So we have a suite of products that solve multiple problems, right? So products per customer, if it's greater than 1 or greater than 2, then the retention rate will be higher for those segment of users. I think that is what has helped us in getting better retention rates.
Thanks. Over to you, Ashish.
I think a lot has been already said in terms of what could be the slice and dice and what would be the retention, of course, the retention percentages or the strategies. Of course, the macro view, again, if I only just sum up with the macro view quickly is you need to work across the length and the breadth. And that is where you need to fill in your services, and that is where you need to fill in the experiences and conveniences. All of these put together is where you build up the retention rate. And on a lighter note, we would want everyone to just come once, get better, and go. So,
yeah. So. So there are examples in the retail industry where you don't really want somebody to come to you in any more frequency than once a year.
yeah. So it's not a bad indicator. It's like how Dr. Karthik was already mentioning that preventive wellness is not a category that has been created already in India. So that is the pain point of the entire industry. But yes, once that is created, the ideal state is only once.
Yeah, I mean, like we were discussing at coffee, you don't want to be on a matrimonial site very often. That doesn't bode well for the business or the people.
Frequency on Bharat Matrimony has to be.
Yeah. All right. So thanks a lot. I think it was an amazing panel. There are still tons of questions. Maybe something about multi-touch attribution that is super hot, but we haven't discussed. There are pieces around data and integration, multiple platforms that, again, not something that we've discussed, but those are things that we may want to discuss offline. But thanks a lot. I think it was a lovely panel. Thank you.